The slave who became emperor. The legend of Pertinax, the unlikely emperor who challenged destiny. They say that fate is a cruel and unpredictable force, often shaping lives in ways no one can foresee. But for one man, it became the ultimate test of perseverance, intellect, and courage. Born into the harsh chains of slavery, this man would rise against all odds to command the greatest empire the world had ever known. This is the extraordinary story of Publius Helvius Pertinax, a former slave who defied the conventions of his time, shattered the boundaries of his birth, and ultimately ascended to the imperial throne of Rome. A journey from chains to a crown, from the bottom of society to the pinnacle of power. This is the tale of a man who challenged destiny itself and became Emperor of Rome. Born into chains, destined for glory, we often hear that fate is written before we are even born, a tale as old as time itself. For some, this means a life of privilege and ease, a golden crown placed on their heads even before they draw their first breath. But for others, it means a life shackled by the oppressive forces of history and society, a life defined by the brutality of their origins. In the case of Pertinax, his fate seemed to have been sealed long before he even came into the world. Born in 126 AD to a humble family, he was the son of a freed slave. But despite his family's newfound status, Pertinax himself was caught in the web of servitude, a victim of the deep inequalities that defined Roman society at the time. To be born into servitude in ancient Rome was to be regarded as property, not as a person with ambitions or potential. To be born a slave meant a life of hardship, humiliation, and the constant knowledge that your future was not your own to shape. Most of the people born into slavery accepted their fates, resigned to a life of labor and subjugation. But not Pertinax. From the very beginning, he rejected the idea that his worth was defined by his social status. Instead of succumbing to the bitterness and despair that many slaves faced, Pertinax chose to embrace a quiet yet powerful resilience. As a boy, he carried himself with a dignity far beyond his years, observing the world around him with an unwavering focus. While others around him were content with their lot in life, Pertinax was a keen observer. He studied the behavior of the wealthy, the powerful, and the influential. He learned the ways of leadership, the art of diplomacy, and the subtleties of power. He was constantly learning, sharpening his mind and his will, preparing for a day when he would not only escape his chains but change the course of history. Escaping the life of a servant, the idea that a slave could escape the chains of his birth and ascend to greatness was almost unimaginable in ancient Rome. Yet Pertinax had something that most people did not: an unyielding hunger for knowledge and a burning desire for freedom. From an early age, he immersed himself in learning. He read about the great generals of Rome and studied their strategies. He trained his mind as well as his body, preparing for the day when he would seize control of his destiny. This hunger for self-improvement would ultimately lead him to enlist in the Roman army, a decision that would change his life forever. For most, joining the army was a way to escape the constraints of civilian life, but for Pertinax, it was much more. It was his path to greatness. It was his opportunity to prove that a man's worth was not defined by the circumstances of his birth, but by his character, his abilities, and his determination. He left the life of servitude behind and entered the brutal world of the Roman military, a world where only the strongest survived, and where rank and respect were earned through blood, sweat, and victory. But could a man who had once been a slave ever command the respect of the noble-born soldiers of the Roman legions? It was a question many doubted. After all, the Roman military was a hierarchical institution where lineage and status often determined a soldier's place. Many scoffed at Pertinax's ambitions, dismissing him as nothing more than a commoner who would quickly falter under the weight of war's brutal demands. But Pertinax was no ordinary man. He had something that the aristocratic soldiers lacked, a fire in his heart that refused to be extinguished, proving his worth on the battlefield. The battlefield, as the saying goes, does not care about one's birth. It does not consider family lineage, wealth, or social status. On the battlefield, there are only two things that matter: strength and strategy. Pertinax quickly proved himself as both a warrior and a leader. He demonstrated an unparalleled ability to adapt to the chaos of combat and outthink his enemies. His rise through the ranks was swift and undeniable. He fought with fierce determination in the far-flung regions of the empire. Whether in the Parthian deserts, the forests of Gaul, or the distant reaches of Britain. Wherever the Roman legions needed him, Pertinax was there, leading his men to victory. It wasn't just his physical prowess that set him apart, it was his tactical genius. Unlike many of his contemporaries, who charged headlong into battle with reckless abandon, Pertinax always thought several steps ahead. He understood the importance of patience, discipline, and strategic foresight. Where others saw only the violence of war, Pertinax saw the broader picture. He knew how to leverage his resources, how to outmaneuver the enemy, and how to win with minimal losses. His success on the battlefield earned him the admiration of his superiors and the respect of his soldiers. He wasn't just a warrior, he was a master of war. As his military career progressed, Pertinax continued to earn victory after victory. He was not only recognized for his skill as a soldier, but also for his leadership qualities. He commanded loyalty, not through fear, but through respect. He proved time and time again that his rise was not a fluke, but the result of hard work, determination, and an unyielding desire to prove that anyone, no matter where they came from, could rise to the top if they were willing to work for it. A rise to power no one saw coming. With each victory, Pertinax's reputation grew. From the battlefield, he moved through the ranks of Roman society. He became a trusted general, and eventually, he was appointed as a governor in various provinces of the empire. He showed himself to be a competent and just ruler, earning the loyalty of the people in the regions he governed. His ability to balance military strategy with political acumen set him apart from many of his contemporaries. But the true turning point in Pertinax's life came in 193 AD when the unthinkable happened. The Roman Emperor Commodus, notorious for his cruelty and erratic behavior, was assassinated by members of his inner circle. Rome, once again, found itself in the grip of chaos. The empire was on the brink of disintegration, and the Senate, desperate for a leader, turned to the most unlikely of candidates, Pertinax. For the first time in Roman history, the Senate turned to a man who had once been a slave. They saw in him the qualities they desperately needed: strength, discipline, and the ability to restore order in a time of crisis. In a bold move, they offered Pertinax the imperial throne, and in 193 AD, he was crowned Emperor of Rome. It was a moment that shocked the empire and the world. The former slave had risen to become the most powerful man on earth. But the challenges Pertinax faced were far from over. Rome was plagued by corruption, decadence, and moral decay. The Praetorian Guard, once a noble and disciplined force, had grown complacent and corrupt. They were no longer loyal to the emperor, but to their own personal wealth and power. Pertinax knew that to restore Rome's former glory, he had to bring the empire back from the brink of destruction. The unlikely emperor takes the throne. When Pertinax took the throne, he did so with a clear vision: to restore discipline, honor, and strength to the empire. Unlike many emperors before him, who indulged in extravagance and corruption, Pertinax was a man of principle. He imposed strict reforms, cutting unnecessary expenses and redirecting funds to the military and public services. He enforced law and order with an iron fist, cracking down on corruption wherever he found it. He believed in a Rome that was strong, disciplined, and united. But Pertinax's reforms would soon make him enemies. The Praetorian Guard, once loyal to Rome but now driven by greed, saw Pertinax's refusal to bribe them as a sign of weakness. They saw the emperor's reforms as a threat to their power and wealth, and they began to conspire against him. What followed would be the ultimate betrayal, a betrayal that would seal Pertinax's fate. The deadly mistake that sealed his fate. Rome, as history has shown time and time again, does not forgive weakness. Pertinax, though a man of honor and discipline, made a fatal mistake. He underestimated the depth of corruption within the Praetorian Guard. In his effort to reform the empire and restore order, he neglected the loyalty of the very soldiers who were sworn to protect him. The Praetorians, furious over his refusal to pay them bribes, turned against him. They saw his attempts at reform not as a necessary step for Rome's survival, but as a direct challenge to their power. On March 28, 193 AD, the Praetorian Guard, led by a faction of officers angered by Pertinax's reforms, stormed the imperial palace. They overthrew the emperor with brutal efficiency. Despite his efforts to reason with them, the guards, consumed by greed, had already made up their minds. A blade was driven into Pertinax's chest, then another, and another. In the space of a few moments, the man who had risen from the depths of slavery to the highest throne in the world was dead. Betrayal in the imperial palace. Though his reign lasted only 86 days, Pertinax's legacy lived on. His death was a tragic end to a remarkable life, but the story of his rise and fall became a legend. Even in the face of betrayal, he refused to show weakness. He faced his death with the same courage and dignity that had defined his entire life. His story was one of defiance, of proving that even a man born into slavery could rise to become an emperor. The legacy of a fallen Emperor Pertinax's reign may have been short, but it was not in vain. His commitment to justice, discipline, and the betterment of Rome left a lasting impression on those who remembered his time as emperor. Though history may have erased his name from the annals of time, the legend of Pertinax lives on as a testament to the power of determination and resilience. He showed the world that no matter where you come from, no matter the chains that bind you, it is possible to break free and change your destiny. What would you have done? If you had been in Pertinax's shoes, would you have taken the throne knowing the dangers and betrayals that awaited you? Or would you have walked away, knowing that the price of power could be your life? Let us know in the comments.